Welcome to the Wooper Club League Season 13, Week 8 Power Rankings. Final week of the regular season is in the books. Playoff rankings are locked in. What are our opinions on those? How do they differ from the power rankings themselves? I am IllLogic, coach of the Buffalo Bouffalant. As always, I'm joined by SteveChuck, coach of the Waterdeep Wobbuffets.
Hey, everybody.
It's the last week of auctions, so why not just get into those and see what's up? Really, again, not that many moves. Route 1 Burbs picking up the Poltergeist in place of the Typhlosion, trying to get a little bit of sweeping potential there outside of the Sun, potentially. Typhlosion a little too straightforward for their liking. Boulders in the event that they get in, overhauling quite a bit of their team. See Titan, really nice to go with the Abomasnow over the Azov, which they were bringing every week consistently. Otherwise, look at all these defensive pieces coming. Gastrodon, Bronzong, and Umbreon over the Chestnut, Venomoth, Avalugg, a couple pieces that just weren't quite working for them. Kanto Kinglers picking up the Masquerain in exchange for both of their Tier 5s. Okay, yep. In Cincinnati, Incineroar, another big retool ready for the playoffs here. Espathra and Haxorus coming in. A lot of experience there, definitely with the Espathra last season for the Incineroar, getting rid of these elements and dropping another Tier 2, Rillaboom. Newport Noctowl's also trying to retool for playoffs. Tornadus Therian coming in over the Cinderace, but they're still going to keep their fire type because Arcanine coming in over the Houndstone is a different physical defensive tool among others. Acronigrods, yeah, that's a 41 over Cryogonal. Over the Palossand, unfortunate that didn't quite work out for them. No ground type anymore, interesting. Calgary Corviknights also picking up Sneasel as a different dark type here over the Skuntank. Couldn't quite figure out what they were doing with that slot and end up with the Sneasel. That's it, actually. Not all that many moves here, Steve. Pretty straightforward, but take us through the final week of the auction.
Yeah, very similar story to what we saw in Week 7, with just a couple people bidding one on pieces to tune up their team. You know, we mentioned like the Incineroar, especially retooling their team, and the Boulders as well. A lot of, big moves, but a lot of people just bidding one, and no one really contesting on very many. There was really only one bidding war, and that was on the Gastrodon that ended up going for 19. All the other mons that went for more, I guess there's a little bit of bidding on the Bronzong. But the other mons that went for more than one were just coaches saying, this is how much I have, I'm going to spend it all. So the Burbs had 8 to spend on Poltergeist and did so. And the Agrons didn't start with 41 on Cryogonal, but as time was closing and they for sure didn't want anything else, they just put it all on for Cryogonal to help those averages look better. But the end result, even with those, anomalies, averages are pretty low. Average overall of 6.5. The average cost of a Tier 1 this week, 1 point. Average cost of a Tier 2 this week, 1 point. Only a total of 12 mons. Really another, lackluster auction. But I'm not too surprised at this point in the season. Most people have a team they like and have been working with. So, changing things up has a lot of risks. The mons that were passed up in Tier 1, the Greninja was passed up. And Tier 2, there was Iron Jugulus and Lycanroc Dusk. In Tier 3, those all were picked up. Tier 4, there was Toxicroak, Fergaraf, Grafai, and Flapple available. And Tier 5, Altaria, Luxray, Knucklestack, Toadschool, Samurott, and Stantler all being passed up. Pretty straightforward, couple fine-tuning, but really nothing extraordinary here.
Yeah, kind of unfortunate, but like you said, for the most part, teams are done. In the one other auction season I've ever done, I did pick up a Reuniclus the final week and brought it to every single playoff match, which was fun. So, potentially some of these Week 8 picks could make a big difference. I think they even made a big difference here in the final week of the regular season. So why not talk about it? And really not much left to decide except for seeding. So, of course, that is when the Steamrollers will decide to take this opportunity to mess with the Wobbuffets here, grabbing their second win of the season in impressive fashion, 3-0. Volcanion lead does nothing to Goodra except for burn. Rain Dance is risky, but Goodra is not hydrational. Goldengo is going to give Goodra a scarf now instead. But hey, there's Basket Legion as Indeedee sacked to get up to Rain. Toadscroll in on Donphan takes 3 cores for its trouble. Deagleam does some to Goodra, who takes out the Toadscroll. Volcanion back in. Rain Dance again. It'll take out Goodra after getting hit by a second T-Bolt. Inteleon does revenge this in a back and forth game, but here comes Basket Legion again. Wave Crash Oko's that, and Oko's an Amherst Therian, and Oko's Donphan. Oh my goodness. And Armarouge is last, survives with Endure. We've seen that set, but there's Clodsire, who ignores that, survives the Psyshock with Unaware, and grabs the last KO. The Wobbuffets dropping their last game to the Steamrollers, who complete the loser sandwich with wins on either end. Next up, one of the matches we've ever had in our league. It's the Noctowls and Burbs going full memes so as to avoid a potential playoff rematch with the Burbs grabbing the coveted win. Muck and Mesprit in the Metronome battle. Eventually Muck gets Brutal Swing into payback to bring it low. Lower still thanks to Poison Touch, ending the initial fight at about 2/3. Ursaluna also has Metronome, so of course on the second turn out, it'll Misty Explosion, 2 down for Jimmy. It only gets better, right? And Toxtricity also has Metronome, so of course the second turn it's out, it'll Lunar Dance, yep. Driftbomb next, and Muck is still using Metronome, and with its last one, will get a Toxic. Absolutely classic. Arbalva is in next as it goes down. Yep, it has Metronome, but Driftbloom's been busy setting up Tailwind and getting off the Terranormal Explosion. Pretty neat. Tornado's in next, and it too has Metronome. Arbalva wins this one, gets Aurora Beam and Moonblast to do most of the damage, leaving Just Fate Porygon. It's got Acid Armor and Stored Power and Tickle. That's pretty fun, and does go down Arbalva there. So the comeback, it's Screamtail next, and you'll never believe it, but that also has Metronome. So of course on the second turn, it gets Perish Song. 3 turns later, that's the game. Didn't even get to see half of Michael's team, but he gets the meta. Poison Touch plus don't KO yourself with Metronome moves. Why didn't the Noctowls think of that? The other interceding match, the Clobbers and Agrons fighting for that 6-2 record, but it's going to be the Clobbers grabbing the better record this regular season. Put it simply, your regular season KO leader with 20 KOs. 20! Is Palafin. Talk about getting him on banned next season. Maybe it'll help carry the Clobbers to a couple playoff wins too. You already know Michael of the Route 1 Burbs will be talking about that Mon in the match of the week, so go check that out here on this channel. Speaking of a team looking to translate some success into postseason success, it's the Calgary Corviknight polishing off their season with a furious back-and-forth win over the Mudkips, a 2-0 to make them the only 7-win team. Early, it's Dragalge Protect scouting Draco Meteor to become a fairy type, helping them win the 1v1 against Tatsugiri. Scizor next Protect Scouts U-Torn, but Bullet Punch right after that. That ain't a band. Heatran Scout Skeledirge next, but as Samurott comes in, it had Earth Power anyways. Protect being a mixed bag here. Finally, Samurott clicking Ceaseless Edge. Finally, 2 will OKO the Helmet Scizor and leave 2 layers of spikes, but Iron Valiant revenges that. 2 Brave Birds from Staraptor will KO Skeledirge, but Iron Valiant will revenge that. Where do the Corviknights get ahead? They'll try with Terra Grass Dreadnought into Raichu, Shell Smashing up using that turn from the Terra, but that's a Focus Sash on Raichu, so Raichu gets that KO too. But here's the opportunity they were looking for. Regidrago in to remain over half after Psyshock, and it gets off a T-Dance. Dragonclaw KOs. Shadow Sneak brings it low, but it survives to KO Decadui, and with one final EQ, Regidrago polishes off its 18th KO of the season. A crazy number if it weren't for that Palafin. As the Corviknights lock in the number 1 seed. Next match. Ooh, this is one we were waiting for. The Incineroar versus the Mudkips for the playoff life of the new look Bulldors. But the Incineroar put things away this time, slamming the door on the Bulldors with a tense W over the impressive Kinglers. Turn 1, it's 2 Intimidators, which is fun. Lando setting up rocks easily on the switch. Iron Tread's in next, but Lando swapped in and out. And that's a Scarf. EQ is an Oko. Dozo in on Glastrier, who subs up, swaps out to Zapdos. It takes half, but gets the para on Dozo and heals up. Volt out of Wigglytuff, who is Ice Beam for the swap into Lando, but it survives on 5. Not quite enough power on Wiggly, strangely enough. With Zapdos back in, Haxorus has to take the electric move now with Ditto on the Revenge, but Wiggly in next. But the Kinglers make the read. Terra Ghost for safety, and Iron Head for the incoming Fairy type for the KO. And with Peck swapping into Tox, the Kinglers are looking good now. Cresselia into Calm Mind against Dozo. Either way, Grass Knot is doing 43%, so into Quillfish to tank that. Toxic the Cresselia, that's actually huge, with Bark Brush doing a bit despite being chipped down itself. Peck's in on the Quillfish again, Dozo on that, and on the swap to Crest, Dozo heals back up, though Crest heals too with Moonlight, paired again by Static, of course, as Volt Switch crits Dozo on the Crest switch back into Haxorus to tank Grass Knot. It gets off Dragonclaw, but it goes down to D-Gleam, and the Incineroar are down big. But if there's a Mon that can do it, it'd be the next Mon out. A Spothra. Calm Mind's on the switch. Calm Mind's again on Glastrier, whose Icicle Crash does less than half. Oh no! Roost up on the sub. Stored Power breaks the sub, and once it gets to max speed, Icicle Crash misses. There's your chance bet. Stored Power will Oko Glastrier, but here's the thing. Ditto says no to setup. But here's the other thing. That's a Ghost-type Ditto. Not going to resist Stored Power anymore, so while Ditto does over half, a Spothra will Oko back. And you already know that's going to be game. Classic Matt using the Espathra so well, 2nd season in a row. 6 KOs for the Ostrich to keep the Boulders out of the playoffs and secure Matt the 8th seed in the playoffs chase. Finally, the Bouffalant putting a punctuation on their season with a win over the Wooper Troopers 3-0. Early parting shot lowers the damage output of Sandy Shocks, meaning T-Tar survives the second Earth Power to get off a D-Dance, so Gardevoir is sacked for absolutely nothing. Sandaconda dodges a move with Sandveil, so it and Fortress trade rocks. Slowking parried by Grimmsnarl, but in is Sandy Shocks to do half to the Snarl, but Play Rough and Sucker Punch actually take down the old Magneton early. Delphox in on Fortress's Body Press, it's not going the Bouffalant's way. Nasty Plant on the swap to Slowking, that'll scare out the Fox into T-Tar, but Chilly Reception into Excalibur will take care of that. Slowking eats up the Tauros hit, so Sandaconda in to coil up, but a crit Surf brings it to just 9. Slowking eats EQ and safely Chillies out to Baxi, grabs another KO. Nice boots. Tauros again. Fortress absorbs this one and Volt Switch out of Delphox into my own Tauros, who grabs that KO. Suddenly the Bouffalant using momentum to grab that momentum back. Tauros Paldea yet again. Slowking absorbs this one, and Chili out into Fortress on Grimmsnarl. Parting shot into Tauros, who takes half of its remaining health with Body Press. Volt Switch out of Grimmsnarl, back into Slowking, back into Fortress, whose Body Press finishes off the Tengu. But here's the first look at Weavile with Boots. Swords Dance up could just easily win the game, especially with Terra Poison to dodge the Body Press, but actually Fortress goes for the Rock Tomb. That'll keep its speed in check, even as it goes for 3 Swords Dances to get to max attack. Tauros sacked, but now Excalibur outspeeds the -1 speed Weavile. That lets Slowking in to Tauros to Future Sight, and a couple turns later, that's all she wrote. Fun game to bring the Bouffalant to a 6-2 record. With the Boulders climbing to a 4-4 record thanks to the forfeit W over the Electabuzz. That is what happened in Week 8, the final week of the regular season. So quite a few very fun matches. No match worse than a 3-0, actually. Here's a look at our power rankings. I think we actually have one change overall here, but it is kind of a significant one, actually. Potentially influenced by some play that we saw from teams inside or outside the top 8 here, and some interesting conversations we had about our confidence levels, I think, overall. The top 3 remain the same. Calvary Corviknight at 1, Buffalo Bouffalant 2, Corviknight Clobberers 3. How about your Route 1 Burbs? Things looking sunny there, I would say, moving all the way from 7 up to 4, dropping down the Noctels, Wobbuffets, and Agrons. The Wobbuffets moving below the Noctels, Agrons just moving down 1 spot, and the Incineroar hanging on there at 8. Not too much to talk about with power rankings. I do want to talk about the matches that are coming up themselves, Steve. But the big one for us is the Route 1 Burbs. Now, I know how easy you are to give into pressure, but I think there are a few reasons why we actually have confidence in the Burbs as opposed to the other 3 teams that they passed up. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, of course they have the win now over the Noctowls, but again, being the me match, it's really hard. You can take even less value from this win than their previous one just using Screamtail. So some of the key factors here were that the Agrons and Wobbuffets lost, and we also felt that the Burbs, Noctowls, and Wobbuffets were all fairly close still. There are certain levels of confidence, and while we kind of have the most confidence in the Burbs and being able to continue out of the quarterfinals, that's really it. Gives them that little bit nod. They haven't had any of the quite as devastating losses, especially more recently. The Noctowls and Wobbuffets both suffering losses more recently, even if some of them were meme battles. But that's really it. A little bit of a shakeup there in the middle, but as mentioned, the top staying the same, and the Incineroar keeping in at number 8.
And we talk about confidence levels a lot here. Yes, the Burbs Noctels basically did not play a match, but when you kind of put things in perspective, it's been a little bit since we've seen a good performance, really, from the Noctels. The Burbs are kind of killing it with an interesting-looking team, but we're going to go into that a little bit more in-depth in just a moment here. Speaking of, this is pretty quick, but we've got a lot to talk about with the actual matchups themselves. So let's take a look at the actual standings here at the end of the season. Mentioned before, it's the Calgary Corviknights alone at the top at 7-1. Makes it pretty easy there at plus 20. Everything else, we do have to go to differential, and that means the number 2 team is actually the Route 1 Burbs, 6-2 plus 19. You may notice that big 6-0 win against the Clobberers is helping them out quite a bit, but even then, still a nice separation from the number 3 team, Bouffalant, 6-2 at plus 14. And the last 6-2 team, the Corviknight Clobberers, in their debut season, 6-2 plus 7. Very impressive. And down to the 5-3s. Waterdeep Wobbuffets leading the way there at plus 12, so some big wins and close losses. Akron Agrons 5-3 plus 5, just edging out the Newport Noctels 5-3 plus 4. And Cincinnati and Incineroar do finish positive, 5-3 plus 2. I'm going to go to the next bit here, just to kind of see what the quarterfinal matchups are. It is 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, and 4 versus 5. But we'll go back here to make sure that you get a nice clean look. Again, 1, 8, 2, 7, 3, 6, 4, 5. We're going to start off with the middle matchup here because we do want to cover some of these matchups. Clobbers and Wobbuffets, actually a rematch from Week 6. Steve, we're going to ask you a question about each of these teams. We're going to start off with the Clobberers here. Palafin, it is the KO leader of the league. I don't know what you guys were thinking when you put this in one of the starting pods, but it was probably my mistake for not being there to stop you. For the Clobberers, does their supporting cast have what it takes to lead them to at least one playoff victory?
Well, there's a little bit of a loaded question when their opponent is myself. But looking besides that, I would say their supporting cast certainly does. They've been very effectively using Klefki and keeping up relevant screens to kind of give their team the longevity it needs to pivot in and out and give Palafin those opportunities to break and then switch out once it is no longer a favorable position for it. The team in general has been doing an all right job of breaking things just low enough. And with how powerful the Palafin is, just low enough is all it needs. Sometimes that's, bringing something down to 80% instead of 100%. Or, maybe a couple of key things bring it lower, or something is faster paralyzing it. But after those key checks are broken down, Palafin very easily cleans house. So I do think their supporting cast definitely has what it takes in general to win some playoff games, but I will certainly do what I can to stop that.
Yeah, I admit I do have some concerns. Really haven't seen things like the Cloth do all that much. Lilligant hasn't been doing much. Even the Slowbro Galler acquired week 1, not doing all that much for them. Maybe once they got a quick Claw proc, maybe a cheeky nasty plot to break down one mon. But I will say, having Garchomp as my other tier 1, basically in a previous season here, it's not a mon that's right now, at least before DLC, is going to shock and wow you, right? It's not going to be something that sweeps by itself. It is still going to be that kind of supporting member. That's what they've been using things like Klefki and Sylveon and Talonflame and Amoonguss for. That really seems to be the core from what I've been seeing that's actually been working for them. Really hope they can expand a little bit past that, because Palafin is very genuinely good, and I mentioned before, boy, we're going to take a close look at that to see if that thing needs to go in future seasons. But it by itself, I'm not so sure. I think it really is a team effort to get everything broken down for Palafin to sweep. Yeah, got quite a few KOs in the feature match that you can see on this channel too from Michael, but really it was the breaking down to get things into range of Jet Punch, even some key resists getting down into that range. And I wonder if the rest of the team has enough heavy lifting to do that. I'm going to say a hesitant yes, but against a good coach, I don't know, let's say it like the Wobbuffets, I'm a little concerned about the rest of the team keeping up. Speaking of, for the Wobbuffets, you've been well documented saying that physical water types have been a bit of an issue. In the rematch from just a couple weeks ago, does the Wobbuffets' experience, compared to the Clobbers who don't really have the same experience in Draft League, does your experience help you enough to overcome Palafin and friends the second time around, in promoting in particular that this is a rematch in Draft?
I am certainly feeling a lot better about the rematch going into it. There are certain, after reviewing the first match, there are certain things you can take away from it, and of course, both of us get the chance to change things, so there is always that, but I can certainly see what worked for the Clobbers before and prepare for it, and they won't have a way to prepare for what worked for me, because nothing has worked for me. But yeah, in terms of the physical water types, Palafin gave me a lot of troubles when I played it, and then Bascule Legion this past week, and that kind of makes sense looking at the team. There's nothing really that likes to take big physical water moves. All the water resists have 70 or less defense with not fantastic HP. So kind of a little bit of a problem that has come up twice now, and hopefully does not reappear for a third time in this playoff match.
It's kind of weird at times. It looks like maybe we would have been better off with each other's Slowkings, which is kind of weird. It would have been a nice water resist for you there. I'm very interested. I guess this is more of a question about the Wobbuffets, but I think I'm a little more interested to see what the Clobbers do the second time around. I wonder if they will prepare enough differently, or if they're going to anticipate things well enough. Yes, it looks like a bit of a fluke at times, where I was Screamtail 6-0'd the Clobbers, so look, the armor set from the Wobbuffets were able to clean house against something. But if the Clobbers show that they can be caught off guard like that, and the Wobbuffets show that they can potentially just sweep with something like that, I'm a little interested to see if the Wobbuffets are going to come up with something like that, or just that one little surprise to take out that key cog to keep their Palafin check healthy, or something to that nature. I think something like that could be very interesting and very key here for an experienced team like the Wobbuffets, as opposed to the Clobbers. So let's move on to the next matchup. It's 3v6 Bouffalant and Agron's, another rematch from Week 6. What is it with Week 6 rematches? That's kind of crazy. My first question is going to be about me, because I love talking about me. This team, the Bouffalant, the squad itself, is questionable at times, I would say, with reliance on a couple of worn-out strats, really. Only a couple of things that the Bouffalant have been able to rely on against other top teams, especially a second time around. Is there enough variance on the Bouffalant's team to get back to the Promised Land?
With the way you have been playing, especially at the tail end of the season, I would certainly expect so. The play towards the end of the season has been fantastic, and I think there is enough decision-making and variation within the team to do it. There are certainly, the same key pieces that will be continuing to work, but what really the Bouffalant do well is using not only just, the top 4 Mons plus 2, it is very much a team effort. If there's a fantastic chance for Tauros to go and, do something great, you're certainly going to see it and utilize it as such. And I think kind of due to the depth and the above average use of lower tier Mons, I certainly expect you'll have enough variation to pick up some key wins and make a hopefully deep playoff run.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Just pulling up how you record the teams here, it shows when Mons are picked up, and kind of interesting that I just noticed this for the first time on the Bouffalant. 2 Mons picked up week 0, for just starting with 1 in week 1, 2 in 3, 2 in 4, 1 in week 5, 2 in week 7, or 2 in week 6, 1 in week 7. A lot of variants that the Mons have just kind of been picked up one at a time. I've tried to craft the team such that there's enough variance to be able to do anything. Feels like I fall back into those traps. I do wonder if some of those traps were very much present in the big loss to the Corviknight there. Maybe just mindset thing, maybe not really utilizing the Monza all that well in prep. I do think it's going to come down to the Bouffalant's prep here. If I feel like I'm playing that well, cool, but can you overcome some unforeseen circumstances and make sure that the prep actually matches the play there? And with this team, I think there might be enough to it. I think there's a couple of underrated Mons, maybe some reappearances for Mons here or there that may be unexpected, but we'll see if I can make things a little bit better there. Mind you, one team that I haven't really struggled against is the Agrons. The Agrons did get 2 wins against top teams here on this list, but it feels like maybe they got caught at the wrong times here, right? Agrons got the win over the number 2 team Burbs, but they already agreed not to use Sun. And they did get a win over the Incineroar, but that was very early in the season when it was a very different looking team and the Incineroar weren't necessarily quite back in it. It feels like it took them a little bit of time to get going. What will it take for the Agrons to actually get a meaningful win against a top team, potentially in these playoffs?
I'm not entirely sure what it'll take. The Agrons have always seemed to struggle in the playoffs. They are fairly consistently good in the regular season. There was a time when they were, the clear number 1 in the regular season, but they've always had trouble converting in the playoffs, and especially against some key opponents, very notably the Bouffalant, who they're matched up with this week. I am not sure what the Agrons need to do to win this. It is very different than everything else, especially, for being the playoffs. It could be as easy as some unique sense, maybe some reliable strategies, but looking at their teams, I'm not sure if they really have that. A defensive core to kind of pivot between that has healing to get that longevity does not seem like something they really have. So does a more offensive approach work for them here? But their gameplay throughout the season really has not left that much of an impression with me, and I'm concerned for them, and I think if I had to pick one of these matches to go one way, it would be this one for the Bouffalant.
It's a little tough. Like you said, you maybe go with some straightforward, old, reliable sets. But I would be a little concerned about the Agrons going a little too tunnel visioned, right? And saying, oh, this works with this, so I just need to bring this. I think a little bit of creativity would go a long way here, and I think especially with Terra, I see some huge Terra candidates here. Articuno, Galar, and Cloyster especially stand out, of course, as very good Terramons, but also things like Tinkaton, I think, has not quite been utilized as well as it could, and I think something with Terra could help support that a decent bit there. Cryogonal, actually a pretty good Terra pickup there as well at the bottom of their team there, and even something just getting a little creative. I really like the Adamant Band Meowscarada they brought the first time against me. Wonder if we can branch out a little bit and get something not entirely out of left field, but something with a little more unique. Get those 1 or 2 surprises that you really do need. We saw a little bit with the Scarf Sucker Punch on it against the Burbs, which actually won them that game, which was kind of neat. I think a little more thinking like that could go a long way for them. Speaking of the Burbs, next matchup, the 2v7, the Burbs versus the Noctowls. We're going to start off with the Burbs up there with the big leap up to number 4 in our power rankings. Number 2 here with a plus 19 differential. That sure is a Sun team they've got there, isn't it? And their real test has been... Actually, I don't think we've really seen a real match with this team. So my question is, what exactly do you think is their ceiling with what looks like a somewhat straightforward team, but it's seen quite a few sweeps and a lot of actually interesting techs along the way? I'm talking Fire Punch in the Sun and Arboliva with Harvest. What exactly is the ceiling of this team, and what do you expect to see?
With the Burbs and how well they've done recently, in terms of their historic league performance, I think the ceiling is certainly another championship. The team is very one-dimensional. However, they've also had lots of success bringing, the same core team of Mons every week and, finding slightly different ways to build them and that 1/6 Mon to change the style enough to pick up wins. And that very much will be the case here. Torkel is going to keep coming to nearly everything, and they're going to certainly build a Sun team. And they don't really have an option. When you're prepping for this team, you know Torkel's coming, because if you're ignoring the Sun mode, I'm not sure if you can pick 6 Mons that don't want Sun on this team. That's certainly what it is. Their Week 8 pickup of Poltergeist really does give them an option for, something not reliant on the Sun. A Shell Smash Sweeper, Terra Abuser outside of that. And of course, they have some other nice pieces that don't really rely on it. The Muck, the Meloetta, but the Walking Wake, the Roaring Moon, the Slitherwing, the Screamtail, all 4 of their top tier Mons, as well as mentioned, the Arboliva likes to use the Sun with Harvest and some other things like that. It is one-dimensional, and it really depends on how much they're able to think about what their opponent's going to do to stop the Sun and what they can do to counter that.
It's kind of interesting trying to preempt what they're going to do to stop that, right? It is kind of interesting that in past, whenever you think of Sun Team, you're just going to think of Chlorophyll Sweepers and Fire types and such, and the Photosynthesis mods have really brought a whole new dimension to that. That being said, there are, I think, still some pretty obviously spammable moves into this team. Like I said time and time again, fairy moves aren't real. They don't exist. They can't hurt me. But certainly they can. There are just a couple types that seem like they can really go in against this team. It's really going to be up to Michael to identify those and pick those off. Maybe there's those 1 or 2 different things here that can open up the rest of the team. I don't even know if they necessarily need to do that, though. With some of the sweeping capabilities of these mods, maybe you just need to dodge the Thunder Wave turn 1, and you can just win without having to worry about anything else. Ceiling is incredibly high, for sure, for this team, but it is so tough to figure out exactly what you need to bring against your opponent here. But if anyone's figured that out, honestly, the Burbs have been doing a fantastic job of figuring out, throughout the past few seasons here, what the right mons are to bring in a matchup and make them work really effectively. That said, though, too, the other very successful team from recent memory, the Noctels, have not actually, this was kind of stunning to me when you brought it up, they haven't really won a real match since Week 4, technically. What do you think is going on here? Do you think the other league is a bit of a distraction to them? Maybe we're distracting them from that league, right? Is it the team composition? I know I was never really particularly high on the Noctels composition there. Or do we think maybe the league is finally starting to figure out what the Noctels are up to?
It's really hard to say with just a sample size of one season, because that does leave open variables, like you mentioned, the team. Of course, there's the other league that they've been creating videos for, I believe, probably because they're required to for that type of match. But not creating videos for this league, so maybe they're not putting quite as much thought or effort into it. It's also possible there's something come up in their personal life and just less time for Pokemon. There's all sorts of things that it could be, and I'm not particularly sure what. And I don't think we'll really get an answer within this season. It'll really come down to, the next season or 2 to see. It also could be that the Noctels just aren't a fan of the auction format and are putting, minimal effort and still doing pretty well for minimal effort. But, they'll really start trying again at another draft, which is their preferred format. Could be something like that. So it'll be really tough. This first match is going to be key for them. They're in very much a slump. Losing 3 of their last 4 games, with the 4th one being a forfeit win. As mentioned, big losing streak. Really need 1 win, and a big win against the Burbs could be just the push they need to make it back to the championship once again.
This does scream to me a Burbs or Steamrollers kind of season, right? Those are a couple teams that traditionally have barely crept in at the end of the regular season and then really gone off in the playoffs. Those are a couple teams that we know are good, that we know we have confidence in. And maybe this is just the time for the Noctels to do it. The regular season, the past few weeks here, we've pretty much had a pretty solid top 8 or 9 here, even with the last 3 weeks left to go. And even their couple of losses there, some of those were still pretty darn close there. I don't know if they needed to put in all that effort and energy to make the playoffs. And now once they're in, maybe their attention shifts a little more to this. And boy, does that sound kind of frightening to me. Definitely the highlight matchup here for me at the quarterfinals is the Burbs and Noctels. This should be an absolute blast. Hoping that they can come back to something here. And the final matchup, the Calgary Corviknight and Cincinnati Incineroar. Steve, I'm not going to even split this up because I've got a pretty similar concern, I don't know if concern's the right word here, suggestion here for these teams. For which of these teams, Calgary Corviknight and the Cincinnati Incineroar, would a playoff win mean more to? The Calgary Corviknight, not quite a storied franchise, the Cincinnati Incineroar, the owners of the comeback season. Which one do you think needs the playoff win more?
I would say for just a playoff win, the Corviknight need that more. Newer to the league. They made the playoffs their first season last time, eliminated there. After being number one in the power rankings and standings for a while here this season, that is a great step in the right direction to then win that first round of playoffs and really continue advancing themselves as a dominant force in the league. However, I will add the caveat that a season win will mean more to the Incineroar after being present for all 13 seasons and missing out so far. With some close matches, they definitely are hungering for that season win, and that would mean so much more to them.
Yes, and while I will say that the Corviknight being the 1 seed, yes, I feel like you do need to get at least one playoff win here. It is the Incineroar for me. I think getting a playoff win, it feels like it's been so long since they've made any noise here, right? They were very close last season with an incredibly close match against my Bouffalant. But it feels like it's been a while since we've talked about the Incineroar as a very big threat in the playoffs. It really even feels like seasons 4 and 5 were their last big hurrahs, and it feels like it's kind of been downhill since then. But boy, the Incineroar really come back the last couple seasons. It's been really fun to watch them bounce back in each of the last 2 seasons to get to where they are now. And I really do want the Incineroar to be up there in the standings a little bit more often. Like you said, they've been around for so long. They were so good, and it really looks like they are coming back. We talk about the memes, but man, they actually got, for maybe the first time in a while, a really big win here against the Noctowls. It's possible to replicate that, and seeing them in the semifinals, I think would be absolutely huge for the league and for the Incineroar. Would love to see that happen, but whew, boy, that is the number 1 team they're going against. This should be an absolute blast as well. All 4 of these matches are coming to you soon. These all look like absolute bangers. Really fun to watch all of these, and these should be coming out in a couple of weeks here. We got a week off. We had a week set aside in case the Bulldors made it, but they did not, so the coaches will get 1 week off before we come back at you with the semifinals. We'll see if we can do anything special for the playoffs, but otherwise, until then, we'll see you.